Hush. May I ask you all for silence? The dreamer is still asleep. May the goddess keep us from single vision and you to sleep. The dreamer is still asleep. He's inventing landscapes in their magnetic field. Working out a means of escape, we'll cut across the crop circles. The seer says no, not much time left for these escape attempts. Look at it this way, in 10 years' time, who'll care? Who'll even remember? One dies like that, deep within it, almost inside it. It's there for a reason. The beginning is also the end. Time defines it. It will end like close friendship. Nothing could be further. We forget the space between people and things is empty. We forget and don't notice the loss. Take all your time. Track the shabby shadow down through hissy mists of history. The dreamer is still dreaming. Hush, may I ask you all for silence? Will he wake in time to catch the sunset? May I ask you all for silence? Tonight we're remembering the earthly form of Peter Martin Christopherson. Sleazy, wrecker of civilization, entertainer through pain, night soil man, time machinist, dweller on the threshold, amethyst deceiver. He was born on the 27th of February 1955 in Leeds. He described his childhood. I was the youngest in a large academic family living in Wimbledon and later in Durham, educated at Chorister School and later a Quaker co-ed boarding school at Ackworth. After A-levels in sciences, I went briefly to State University of New York in Buffalo, studying fiction writing, computer programming, theatre design, and video. My early photographs were of white trash kids, a bit like Larry Clark's work. He comes back to Britain in the early 70s. March 1974, he becomes an assistant at Hypnosis, the design company. By 1978, he's made a joint partner, along with Storm Thorgerson and Aubrey Powell, working on legendary LP sleeves. For example, this Pink Floyd Animals and Wish You Were Here. And he takes the photos on the first 3 albums by Peter Gabriel. He also photographed the Sex Pistols in the toilets of a local YMCA near Denmark Street, photographing them as psychotic rent boys. Malcolm McLaren destroyed the pictures. At the same time, he created early designs for the London Dungeon, but they were thought too gruesome. Also in 1974, he went to an exhibition in London by Transmissions, Genesis Peerage, Cosey, Fanni, Tutti. He found kindred spirits and performed with them in early 1975. Transmissions celebrate transgression. They make the noise of a society undoing itself, magical rituals to disturb the body's equilibrium and destabilize society. They say sex is sensual, delirium, escape, the key to magic, joy, excitement. We expand ourselves to boundaries, even destroying, condemning ourselves to forms of madness and isolation, to damnation in evil forms. We need each other, hate each other. Hate is nothing. 1976, at the ICA in London, the prostitution show. Transmissions are described in the Houses of Parliament by Tory MP Sir Nicholas Fairbairn as wreckers of civilization. Out of this alliance comes Throbbing Gristle, Peter Christopherson, Chris Carter, Cosey and Genesis. From their East London base, they establish a war front. Industrial Records, one of the first independent labels of the punk era. But it's beyond punk. Industrial music, they said, was closest to journalism and to a documentary in black and white of the savage realities of fading capitalism. Tone supersedes melody and effect supersedes pleasure. They go to Beachy Head for this album cover. An aggressive use of whimsy, said Genesis. In their performances, Sleazy built his own equipment. He uses a tape sample player, a keyboard-triggered sampler, long before the Fairlight sequencer or digital technology. He calls it the Gristleizer. And years later, he was selling it. After Throbbing Gristle, he forms Psychic TV in 1981. And in this group he meets Jeff Rushton, also known as John Balance, who would become his partner both in life and in Coil, which until Balance's death in 2004 became a cornerstone of British underground music. With their friends and collaborators, Current 93 and Nurse with Wounds, Coil constitute a shadowy English underground scene whose work accents peculiarities of Englishness through the links and affinities they've forged with earlier generations of the island's marginals and outsiders, such as playwright Joe Orton, writers like death decadent Eric Count Stenbock, and ecstatic mystic novelist Arthur Machen, and occult figures like Austin Osman Spare and Aleister Crowley. In many cases, a combination of social inadequacy and the received critical wisdom that deemed their work too damn perverse, decadent or mad, resulted in them being ignored in their own lifetimes and condemned to obscurity thereafter. Like Current 93 and Nurse with Wound, Coil have helped disinter the art and lives of such lost figures, factoring them into their portrayal of England's hidden reverse. Bathed in their light, Englishness is not always a pretty sight. O Rose, thou art truly sick. Coil began in 1982. Sleazy hones a unique, organic electronic and later digital style to complement John Balance's transgressive pagan lyrics. And he builds another instrument, the sick tone. He was one of the first to miniaturize music, one of the first to use a laptop computer in the mid-90s. But he didn't make a show of this newness of being state-of-the-art. None of it's announced with a fanfare. There's a curtain always over the proceedings. Coil believed in the importance of ritual as a practice that gives a life meaning. Where organised churches have exploited knowledge and ritual for centuries, Sleazy took the William Blake view that he must create his own system or be enslaved by another man's. Coil embraced powerful experiences to counter the feeling that powerful and meaningful experiences are being suppressed. Sexuality, spirit, nature worship, drugs. They talk about delirium subliminals, atavistic glimpses of a grand chaos, surfacing in flashes of black light, in darkest Dali, Alfred Jarry, the Moomin Trolls, the Virgin Prunes, in the face of Edith Sitwell, Boyd Rice's humour, emotional subliminals. Psychic information, partly deliberate, mostly instinctive. 24th of August 1983, a slow fade to total transparency, their one and only live performance from that time. Coil played the Air Gallery in London as a trio featuring Balance and Soft Cell's Mark Almond, where they performed a slow fade to total transparency, which involved the members giving themselves fake blood enemas while Almond read extracts from his diary, thereby recasting the title as a paean to going public with secret thoughts and rituals in an attempt to tear down psychological barriers and make the internal external. The audience included Nick Cave, Lydia Lunch and Jim Thirlwell, who with Almond made up the Immaculate Consumptive Review that played 3 Halloween shows in Washington, D.C. and New York that year. Almond befriended Balance during their mutual involvement with Psychic TV. At the time of Coil's Air Gallery performance, Almond was a mainstream pop star with a global hit in Soft Cell's Tainted Love. Around this time, Sleazy says, In England, the eccentric is part of the history of the country. There has always been the village idiot. In this period, the early 80s, Coil were using techniques such as cut-ups, ritual drug use, sleep deprivation, lucid dreaming, sidereal sound, granular synthesis, tidal shifts, John Dee scrying, digital glitches, SETI synchronization, chaos theory. Sidereal sound they described as, obviously the term sidereal relates to stars, but also to looking at reality sideways, from a new angle or perspective. In 1985, they worked with Jarman on the soundtrack to The Angelic Conversation. Sleazy samples the sound of a tuning up orchestra. Sleazy remembered recording Love's Secret Domain. We started seeing spectral presences in the studio, which looked like the mummified figures of ancient kings and queens. Coil's activities during the 1980s and early 90s, from their base in Chiswick in southwest London, were mostly funded by Sleazy's parallel career as a director of music videos. He needed to make a living. In alphabetical order, he directed videos for Mark Almond, Ash, Björn Again, Bomb the Bass, The Christians, Erasure, Fairground Attraction, The Firm, Gavin Friday, Front 242, Diamanda Galas, Galliano, Barry Gibb, Hue and Cry, Nick Kershaw, Level 42, Paul McCartney, Ministry, Nine Inch Nails, Pink Floyd, Robert Plant, Rage Against the Machine, Chris Rea, Vic Reeves, Sepultura, The, Van Halen, and the most incredible of all, Van Morrison and Cliff Richard. He also made commercials. Coca-Cola, Gillette, the best a man can get, Max Factor, McDonald's, Miller Lite, Nissan and Pan Am. But at the same time, Coil is continuing. In the mid-90s, they are experimenting with electronic and digital music. Worship the Glitch, Coil versus Elf, based on found tapes, mutated. It really felt like we were channeling something, or at least that's an idea we allowed ourselves to play with. The whole thing with Worship the Glitch was to see how much we could take away from it, and it still retained some kind of structure. That's why some of it is so sparse and ghostly. Sleazy found a battered old reel-to-reel tape. They were disseminating directives and signals through a television, old cassettes and malfunctioning studio equipment. The glitches and flaws endemic to digital and analog media popped spaces in the sound, and the past streamed through them to point the way forward. Coil simply acted as an antenna for these signals, dubbing the project Worship the Glitch. they approached the millennium, 1998, they produced time machines. Electronic drones designed for crossing thresholds, chemical sonic interfaces for reaching the beyond. And in the middle of the CD sleeve, a black mirror like that used by the Elizabethan magician John Dee. In 1999, Sleazy and John Balance leave Chiswick. They move to Weston-super-Mare, Wessex, and install their threshold house in the countryside. One writer who visited them at the time said of their house, "This sturdy sanctuary sits on a veritable nest edge of a cliff, a mare's nest halfway between beech and branch, hanging in the air, abutting a wood of oaks, a real threshold house." And in the West Country, outside the city, they start tuning into other rhythms, recording at the solstice and at the equinoxes. And making a music to play in the dark, moon music, morning music, haunted by older voices. Sleazy says, "Music to play in the dark is one of our first attempts to redefine that time when it became dark, the sun set and you were sitting by the fire, and people would tell stories to each other. And that's the time when genuine magic was woven between people and language became more powerful." At the same time, produces astral disaster. The heavens can also bring bad omens and ruin. For the first time since that early performance, they start performing live again. Big shows, London, Barcelona, Russia. Their appearances sprite-like, furry astronauts, illuminated, strobed, screaming. The slogan projected above, "Persistence is all." At a festival called Outro at the Barbican in London, a couple of weeks after the Twin Towers were destroyed in 2001, Coil played live, Sleazy was controlling live video game imagery of a twisting, turning passenger jet, eternally tumbling, looping the loop, barrel rolling, tilting, dive bombing, and at the end, crashing. In 2004, Throbbing Gristle reform. It's a different time. And Coil push further into their own visionary landscape, into England's hidden reverse, into an organic, genetically modified folk music, black antlers, the ape of Naples. On 13th of November 2004, John Balance falls to his death. A memorial service is held near Bristol. His coffin is pulled in a horse-drawn hearse. Sleazy says, shortly after, "To me, any kind of psychedelic can be a really amazing way of opening a door and showing views that you've never seen before. But once you've had a really good look, I don't think you need to continue seeing, if it's still there, by opening the door again." The following year, he moves to Thailand. Where ritual is part of everyday life, not something subjugated and secret. Finds a new happiness there. In a duo with Russian musician Ivan Pavlov, he creates Soy Song. And alone, he becomes the Threshold Houseboys Choir. We're having a lot of fun right now, he says, with a teaser campaign which purports to show that the vocalist is an alien child that we have abducted. But between you and me, the vocals are all made in the computer. In Bangkok, on 24th of November 2010, he dies in his sleep. Wise words from the departing. When I moved away from England and what was a difficult time with Coil, my iPod was filled with sad music, the most melancholy of Turkish duduk type pieces. And everyone reinforced the melancholy and bleakness of humanity and of life. Since I've moved away from that, my iPod is filled with not necessarily happy sounds, most of them are in a minor key. But at the same time, I do feel that life is to be enjoyed. And whatever we can do to make ourselves feel better, and if possible, help other people feel better too, that's got to be a good thing. Wise words from the departing. On this Coil track called Broccoli, Sleazy voices his own dead father, giving advice from beyond the grave.
the death